The bright lights above the hearing room hummed softly as cameras focused in, ready to capture every second. The air felt heavy, like everyone inside knew something big was about to happen. They just didn't know what. Donald Trump sat at the center table, flipping through papers, looking like a man used to having the last word. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett adjusted her mic, calm and steady, her eyes never leaving him. The room waited. Nobody knew the next few seconds would freeze time and spark a conversation that reached far beyond those walls. It all started with one simple question. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady, her words clear. She wasn't rushed. She wasn't angry. She simply asked the question that had been building up through hours of testimony. Mr. Trump, can you explain why your 2019 and 2020 financial reports show such big gaps in the value of your overseas properties? Her tone was respectful, but firm. She wasn't there for drama. She was there for answers. Across the table, Trump looked up from his papers, the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. His body language said it all, relaxed, confident. Like a man who'd been in tough rooms before and believed he could steer his way through this one too. He didn't rush to answer. Instead, he leaned back slightly, glanced at the cameras, and brushed her question aside with ease. "I've been more open about my finances than anyone here," he said, waving his hand like he was shooing away a harmless fly. His words floated out, light on the surface, but heavy with meaning. "And frankly, your tone is disrespectful." His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It was calm, but it carried the kind of weight that comes from knowing the world usually listens when you speak. The room shifted. Staffers who had been typing stopped mid-sentence. Reporters glanced up from their notes, sensing the air change. The soft clicks of camera shutters seemed louder now, as every lens tightened focus. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the room as people waited for what would come next. Crockett didn't blink. She didn't look away. She turned a page in her folder, slow and controlled, not giving an inch. That's when Trump said it. "Sit down, girl." Simple words spoken in the same easy tone as before. But the moment they left his mouth, it felt like the oxygen had been pulled out of the room. No gasp, no shouting. Just stillness. A kind of silence that said everyone understood something important had just happened, even if they weren't sure how to react. Some aides froze, with their hands still hovering over keyboards. A few lawmakers looked down at their desks. Others raised their brows, but no one spoke. It wasn't the volume of what he said. It was the weight those words carried, especially directed at a woman who had fought hard to be in that room, at that table. A woman who had earned the right to ask hard questions. The phrase landed differently. Not because it was loud or harsh, but because it touched something deeper. Something tied to history, to old habits of how power speaks to people it thinks don't belong. Crockett stayed still. For a second, maybe two, she didn't move. She let the moment sit, like she was giving everyone a chance to feel it. And they did. Inside that hearing room, inside newsrooms, watching live. Inside homes where people had paused what they were doing to see what would happen next. Outside the walls of Congress, the reaction began before the moment was even over. On phones in the laps of reporters, hashtags popped up. Live chats filled with fast-typing viewers. Some shocked, some defensive, some just trying to process what they'd heard. News producers at major networks leaned toward their screens, fingers already cutting clips to be shared within minutes. On social media, the phrase, "sit down, girl," started trending before the hearing had even ended. But in that room, in that frozen silence, it wasn't about hashtags or headlines yet. It was about a power dynamic laid bare, not through yelling or anger, but through a single sentence that reminded everyone how easy it can be to try to shrink someone with words, and how rare it is to see someone choose not to be shaken by it. The conflict wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The real tension came from what wasn't said, from the quiet stares, from the waiting, from the knowledge that millions of people were now watching, seeing if Crockett would fire back, or if Trump would follow up, or if the room would return to normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. This was a moment that wasn't planned, wasn't staged. It was real. And as the seconds stretched on, the world outside that hearing room kept turning its head, drawn to the quiet storm unfolding live on their screens. Jasmine Crockett didn't speak right away. She sat there, still and calm, as if she wanted everyone to really feel the weight of what had just been said. The seconds stretched longer than usual, and in that space, the room grew quieter. No one coughed, no one shuffled papers. Even the cameras seemed to lean in closer, waiting. Crockett's eyes stayed on Trump, steady and focused. She didn't look shaken. She didn't look angry. She looked clear. She let the moment sit because she understood that sometimes silence can speak louder than words, and this was one of those times. When she finally spoke, her voice was smooth, low, and full of purpose. "You may have spoken to a lot of women like that in your life," she said, her tone even, her words chosen with care. "But I'm not here to serve you. I'm here to serve the truth." She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The words landed gently, but they hit hard. The kind of hard that stays with you. The room seemed to hold its breath. The silence deepened, not because people didn't have things to say, but because no one wanted to break the power of what had just been spoken. The chairman didn't bang the gavel. No one tried to jump in. The cameras stayed locked on her face, on his, on the space between them. It was like the entire hearing froze in place. For the first time that day, Trump looked as if he didn't have the next move ready. The smirk that had sat so comfortably on his face began to fade. He opened his mouth slightly, as if searching for words, but none came right away. He tapped. His pen on the table, glanced at his papers, then looked up again, trying to find a way to shift the moment back in his favor. But the room had already shifted. Outside those walls, the world was watching. Clips of the exchange were already spreading online. News sites cut the video and posted it within minutes. People on social media rewound it, shared it, added captions. Like "this is how it's done," or "calm strength wins every time." It wasn't just activists or political voices. Teachers showed it to their students. Parents showed it to their kids. College students dropped it into group chats. Ordinary people who maybe never watched a hearing before were now glued to their screens, seeing something that felt bigger than just politics. Commentators on TV spoke about it with wide eyes. Some focused on the words Crockett chose. Some focused on how she didn't flinch. Some focused on how Trump, so often the loudest person in the room, seemed unsure for once. But most agreed on one thing. It was a moment where calm won over chaos, where truth stood taller than noise. What made it hit harder wasn't that Crockett tried to fight fire with fire. She didn't need to. She stayed exactly who she was. And by doing that, she shifted the mood of the room. The hearing wasn't about financial records anymore. It wasn't about politics as usual. It was about respect. About how words can try to shrink someone and how strength can refuse to be shrunk. And so, while Trump searched for a comeback, the moment kept growing beyond him. Beyond her, beyond that room. It became something that people everywhere talked about. At kitchen tables, in classrooms. At work, on the bus. It was no longer just a sentence said in a hearing. It was a question for everyone watching. How do you respond when someone tries to put you in your place? Crockett had given her answer, and it echoed far beyond those walls. After the cameras stopped rolling, the hearing room slowly came back to life. Papers were gathered, chairs scraped quietly against the floor, and aides whispered to their bosses about what to do next. But no one could shake what had just happened. Inside Congress, the conversation had already begun, not on the record, not in front of the cameras, but in side halls and behind closed doors. The Ethics Committee called a quiet meeting to talk about what they had seen, watching the clip again in silence. Some members pushed for a statement about respect and how future witnesses should re-speak to members of Congress. It wasn't about taking sides. It was about drawing a line, however small, that showed the moment hadn't been ignored. Crockett didn't chase the headlines that followed. While news shows and talk panels played the clip on repeat, while hashtags trended and opinion pieces filled websites, she kept her focus where it had always been, on her work. No press tour, no big speeches about the exchange. She returned to hearings, kept asking her questions, kept writing policy meant to help real people. She didn't try to turn the moment into a brand or a slogan. She didn't need to. The country had already done that for her. Across the nation, something had shifted. People talked about more than just the words that were spoken that day. They talked about meetings where they had been talked over, classrooms where they hadn't been taken seriously, jobs where respect felt like something they had to earn twice over. Stories poured out from people who had been waiting for a moment like this to remind them they weren't alone. Crockett's response wasn't just shared, it was studied. In schools, debate clubs, book clubs, office meetings, people pointed to it as a lesson in staying calm when it matters most. Crockett became something larger than just the Congresswoman in that hearing. She became a quiet symbol of what it means to stand firm without shouting, to correct without attacking, to let truth do the heavy lifting. And in doing so, she showed that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the steady voice that doesn't waver when the room grows tense. In the end, it wasn't about one phrase or one hearing. It was about what happens when someone holds their ground with truth, no matter who is watching. That's what stayed with people. Not the argument, not the headlines, but the reminder that respect, real respect, is earned by how you carry yourself when it would be easier to break. And in that moment, Crockett didn't break. She stood. And that made all the difference.